I want to introduce everyone to Carol Kaufman, who is somebody, she has the heart of an organizer, but she really, truly, deeply is the kind of person that is an entrepreneur that knows how to expand a business, build a business, create a business that is actually useful for people. And I want Carol to tell us a little bit about her background, because when I met her, she was doing something a little bit different, but now she's doing something that I love and want to talk about too. So Carol, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Well, my background, my formal background is I have undergrad and graduate degrees from the University of Michigan, working with emotionally impaired and learning disabled adolescents.
Oh, I didn't
And
know that.
yes, I ran a resource room for 7 years just outside of Ann Arbor.
Mm.
And I met my former husband, who was a commodity trading advisor in the hedge fund industry. And we had a whirlwind relationship and were married 2 months later.
Wow.
So I moved to New York City and I wanted to open up a teacher's store, but he insisted that we work together. And I thought it was a bad idea. And he insisted, and we did. And it was a terrible idea. And I became a single mom when our son was 18 months old.
Wow.
Yeah. I had learned all about the hedge fund industry. I did by the seat of my pants. So when we split up, I started a software company in 1982 that did investor accounting for hedge funds and funds of funds. And if you had ever told me that I would have an investment accounting software firm 3 times, I would have said to you, what are those? That's crazy. I grew the company for 20 years and all of my skills transferred because my skills were taking difficult concepts and breaking them down to their basic components. And that's kind of what organizing is, isn't it? You take
Absolutely.
something difficult and you break it down. So I was helping organize clients back in the 80s. I grew the company for 20 years, learned how to grow a business. I was a Y2K consultant. Do you remember Y2K?
Yeah, my mom did a lot of that. Yeah.
I was a Y2K consultant to Chase, and
Mm.
I evaluated 123 different firms for Y2K readiness. So I learned all about business continuity and disaster recovery and things like that. And I was approached by a company, very well known $10 billion company, SunGard, in 2002. And they wanted to acquire the assets of the company. And I let them. And I let them because in 1994, a number of years earlier, my parents were on their way back from their country home and they were in a car accident.
Mm.
And my mom was instantly killed.
Oh.
And my dad was in a coma and he had a 2% chance of surviving. And he did survive. He awakened from the coma after mom's funeral, which I made them record so that he would be able to see it and get closure. But he had traumatic brain injury.
Mm.
So for the next 14 years, I was his primary care coordinator and built a handicap accessible addition onto my house so that he could come with his aides, the support staff, and live with me. And he passed away in my house.
Mm.
And that was in 2008. And that was when my nightmare began. So in 1994, I still had organized, by the way, the name of the company was Organizer Systems, just that 20-year-old company. So
Mm.
that should give you your first clue. In 1994, I was juggling my company and I was juggling being a single mom. That was my number one priority. And I was taking care of my dad.
Mm.
So when SunGard approached me, it was actually perfect timing.
Mm.
So that's why I sold the company. And when Dad passed away in 2008, I had to go on a 5-year scavenger hunt to look for all of the information I needed to settle the estate. So my dad used to create something called a data locator every 5 to 7 years.
Mhm.
And it was a list, a typed list, and I actually have it, of all of his important information, all of his bank accounts, brokerage, everything. But the last time he had updated it was 5 to 7 years before the accident, which was 1989. Now, 2008 is 19 years later. It was stale. It didn't even have the safe that the combination to the safe that my parents had. So I had to get a safe cracker to come in and open the safe. So that was when I decided to start Care Binders. And you remember Care Binders and CB Data. It was a PC version that consolidated all the personal and medical and financial information for every family member on a PC. 4 years ago, I decided to start a rewrite of the software. And I was told that because I had CB Data, it would only take 6 months at the most. And now it is 10:30 on March 13th, 2022, 4 years later. And the only part that we have converted is the personal part, which is the home inventory. And we got such an incredible reaction to that, that it's just been expanding that as opposed to adding on the additional components. So the PC version has home inventory, but it doesn't have a mobile app that goes with it where you can take photos and type in or dictate in information. And when you hit save, it seamlessly, securely sends it to your online account. It does have the ability for you to attach documents, but it doesn't have the ability for asset distribution. It doesn't have insurance reports. It doesn't have labels that you can create. It doesn't have your workflow that we're about to put into Pinventory. So when we released this new version, we changed the name and we changed it to Pinventory because it's a personal inventory and a professional inventory. So that's a bit of the story about why Pinventory and what I do.
Well, I really love, I mean, I saw Pinventory when it first came out, and I love the fact that it's evolving all the time. We do inventories all the time, sometimes handwritten. We've been doing it for so long. It didn't really occur to me until recently that, more than a few years ago, that I needed to kind of create a visual inventory for clients to be able to use them. And so I started using Airtable, and I just created our own, it's like a little database with photos and the fields that we were interested in. And then I started looking around at different options. I want to try out Carol's because I had a different idea of what you were offering. And then when we had a conversation about it, I was blown away by how much you've added to it since I first looked at it. And I love the fact that it's an evolving system that people can use in a variety of ways. And I love the fact that you know who organizers are, the things that we're interested in, and that you care about what we're interested in. And as move managers, what we're interested in. I just really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. The reason that Pinventory has taken on a life of its own, as opposed to CB Data, because we're listening to our clients. one of our clients was complaining that they had to do double duty because they would go into a storage facility and they would unpack the box, they would open the boxes, they would take out each item and take a photo of the item. And then the items that they wanted to sell, they had to go to Max Sold and do a complete catalog. And they made the comment, why don't you just interface with Max Sold? And we thought about it and we thought, that actually makes sense. So they introduced us to the people at Max Sold. And within the next few weeks, we're going to be releasing our new enhancement so that once you have your inventory with Pinventory and you can have room views, you can have box views where you can take photos of boxes, items that are going into a box and dictate what the contents are. You can have all kinds, but you can also have individual photos with descriptions and values and whatever else you want. So if they're already in Pinventory, why shouldn't you be able to just check a box for each of the items that you want to go in the Max Sold catalog and hit a button and put in the catalog number and your email address that you've set up with Max Sold and send it over. And that's exactly what we've done.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know what Max Sold is, it's basically an online auction for estates or homes that people have moved out of and they've left everything behind that they don't want and they want to try to sell it. You should check it out. It's on maxsold.com. Did the pandemic affect you in any way?
It allowed me to focus. I couldn't go anywhere. I was locked in here. It probably made us more productive in terms of what we were doing and more focused on it. But in terms of use of the product, sadly, we did not see the surge that we had hoped we would see. You have to remember that extreme weather has played a huge part of the last 2 years, year and a half. And we thought that, and combined with people staying at home, would get tons of people flocking to use Pinventory. And the reality is we didn't. And I think a lot of it, and I've posted posts about it, I've posted polls to find out why people don't do home inventories. And there are two recurring concepts. One of them is that people don't want to do a home inventory because they don't like the thought of death. They don't want to think about it. They feel that the reason to do an inventory is because of death. And consequently,
it's so
they
silly.
step away. Well, it may be, but it's a reality.
I have a really good friend who, had a flood in her apartment, and she hired us to kind of help her get through the process of kind of creating an inventory that she could then give to the insurance company. And it
takes a tragedy.
Yeah, it really does.
Takes it. And that's the second reason. Proactive versus reactive. Unless it happens to you, you say it's not going to happen to me. I have a very good friend. She lives in New Orleans and she's high net worth. And she lived near the levee. And they got the call to evacuate and they packed up their overnight. Just, they always used to get the call to evacuate. This was just another one of those nights. So they packed up a small bag. Their daughter tucked her baby dolls into bed and put the cover on to make sure they were okay. And they went to some friends in Texas and they kept checking Google Maps to make sure that their area was okay. But they couldn't see their area. All they saw was blue. And the reason all they saw was blue was because when the levee broke, their home went completely, I mean,
Wow.
completely underwater, as did their entire neighborhood.
Mm.
They didn't have a home inventory
Oh.
and they didn't have Chubb insurance
Oh, yeah.
and they did not get a penny for
Oh my
contents.
God.
With that, Ellen started using Pinventory. And when she went down to go see her place for the first time, the insurance adjuster had said to her, now, I want a list of everything. She said, I was on the plane and I kept trying to remember what was on each wall, what was in each closet, what was in each drawer. And I just couldn't. So proactivity is the second issue. People don't believe in being proactive. They think it's going to happen to somebody else. The third reason is that why people don't do the home inventory. They don't feel they have enough that warrants it. What they don't recognize, most people have more value in the contents of their home than they do in their bank accounts. They don't understand that. And there are so many items that may not be financially valuable, but are sentimentally valuable, that really you want to take a photo of.
There have been so many times when I've told a client, do you really, you don't need to keep it, but you can take a photo and that's as good as having the thing because you can
Yep.
remember it. You know?
Yep. And with Pinventory, you can take those photos and you can create a report. Like you can label those kinds of photos memories.
That's great. I love that. So do you have a word of advice for my folks out there?
You can do a personal inventory, which is of physical assets and digital assets. Very, very important. I always take a photo of all my credit cards front and back, and I do that for clients as well. So that should anything happen, you don't have to rack your brain and try to figure out which credit card you left in the drawer, where your passport is, where your driver's license, all your medical cards. You have a copy of all of them. There are so many ways to use Pinventory, personally and professionally. So the best time to do an inventory is when you get married or when you start living with someone. For me, a lot longer ago than 20 years ago, but many years ago. The next best time to do it is right now. With all of the extreme weather going on, with everything that's going on right now. And it doesn't take long to do an inventory. To really be prepared, they should call you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I so appreciate you coming on and and kind of sharing your wisdom and your own experience with us, because I definitely believe that we need to be prepared. We need to do our best to be prepared.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that in the 2022 that we get a lot of people who realize that an inventory is a vital part of your life, and it's your responsibility to get it done, whether they do it on their own or if they need some help, we can do that.
It's
So
so important to have the inventory for determining if you're underinsured, because 67% of people are, for trusted advisors to be able to protect you and plan for you properly, for you to find things that you've stored or packed. Well, more important, it's to be able to accurately prove what you had if you have a loss or a disruption or a disaster or a theft of any kind. So for all of these different reasons, call Janine.
Well, thank you, Carol. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. I really appreciate the time that you've taken to share with us today.
Thank you.
Inventory and your story. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.